All right, welcome everybody to the Lakers Legacy podcast, where forget about five guys, it's all about the Lakers' number 55 guys. Because for the second year in a row, barring any potential moves, the Lakers will once again be drafting at the number 55 spot. Now, there's no Bronny James this year, but there may be a Sion James. Sion who? I don't know, but we'll get into it. I'm your host, Jonathan Hernandez, and today, for this special 2025 NBA Draft episode, I am pleased to be joined by Tyler Rucker from the great No Ceilings NBA crew, one of the best resources you'll find anywhere for NBA Draft content. Tyler, thanks so much for hopping on the show today. How are you holding up with the much heralded Cooper Flag draft just around the corner?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on, Jonathan. Yeah, it's really it's just around the corner. It's crazy to kind of wake up and realize how quickly it's going to be here. So I'm doing great. Exciting time of the year, even for a team like the Lakers. It's who are they going to try to add in the second round? They could try to make some moves. What's going on? So a lot of buzz in the air. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, it should be a crazy draft, not only because of the depth of talent available in this draft, but because of the potential fireworks we might be seeing with regards to NBA trades ahead of a pretty landscape shifting 2025 offseason. Before we get started, do you want to plug your socials real quick and plug anything that you guys have brewing up over at No Ceilings as your guys' respective D-Day comes to a head next week?
Yeah, just at No Ceilings NBA is our social media handles, but you can go to NoCeilingsNBA.com, and we've got a draft guide this year. We went 100 players deep, so for a fan base like the Lakers, you guys might be very interested with that because we've got kind of names in the depths of our reports. So each page has got or each player, excuse me, has got 3 pages, kind of illustrations, synergy charts, as much as you can want, player comps and everything. So yeah, that's all I got to plug, but go check it out. You won't be disappointed.
Awesome. Yeah, please check out No Ceilings Draft. You guys leave no stone unturned, which we really appreciate. Yeah, so today we have Tyler on to help educate us on some second round to potential undrafted free agent prospects that Lakers fans might want to familiarize themselves with because regardless of where the Lakers sit currently at number 55, Rob Pelinka is always trying to finagle his way into buying an early second round pick. So I think it would be wise for us to do our due diligence on some prospects that span the gamut of this back end of the draft. So today we'll mainly talk about big man and wing prospects that fans should look out for. But first, before we get into any specific names, Tyler, how would you characterize the depth of this draft class in general? Is it top heavy? Is it pretty evenly spaced out? How's the breadth of talent as we inch out of the first round and into the second compared to most recent drafts the last 2 years?
Yeah, I think there's some real firepower in the first round. Obviously, Laker fans are gonna be hearing this and being like, "Well, how can?" But it's if we're talking about the whole class in general, there's some real firepower near the top. Then it kind of gets to when you get to like that 10 and on range, you're kind of getting to some like, hey, is it upside swings or getting the productive upperclassmen? There's some intriguing depth in that first round, especially if someone can get in there. I think teams are going to try to be active to be like, hey, there's a spot we really think towards the end of the first that we could still get a guy. Now, I still think there's good depth in the second round. We kind of took a hit with the overall amount of like firepower with that depth, with a lot of names going back for college basketball with the early withdrawal deadline, but there's still some really good guys when it comes to like more specialists. If you need a big that's really physical down low, you're going to be able to find that anywhere in the second round. And there's some really good ones I think that are underrated. There's also some wings that are kind of specialists when it comes to floor spacing and productive and efficient. So I think maybe, there might not be like oh gosh, we found Jimmy Butler really late or we found gold in the second round, but there's some guys that we might be surprised are becoming rotation assets for a certain team. So definitely think there's still some intriguing depth. It's just not much as, we might find a starter in the second round if we got lucky, but now you might get a really good piece.
Yeah, that's good to know, especially for a team like the Lakers who are looking for more specialized skill sets as they try and compete now, quote unquote, with Luka. All right, so the Lakers are picking at number 55. So let's talk about big men first. For the purposes of this exercise, because obviously we don't know which prospects are going to slip, which prospects may get to the 40th pick and then have their agents try and angle them all the way to the Lakers, the way Austin Reeves did back in 2021. So I guess I want you to give me 2 or 3 of your favorite big man names from, let's say, the number 35 all the way to number 60 range and beyond, who you think would be a good fit for a Luka centric team. I have names in mind, but I want to see who you pitch first.
Yeah, it is. The second round, especially, always kind of gets to a little interesting because there is always some stuff going on behind the scenes where a player could go a little bit later. It's like, how are they still on the board? And it's like, well, maybe they're trying to steer a certain direction. But,
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the biggest names that probably Laker fans are familiar with, but I think as a wild card is still Hanson Yang. He's been really interesting kind of throughout this pre-draft process. It's kind of a wild card right now because he could go much earlier where a team's trying to target him in that early second round, maybe extreme late first round. I think everyone's intrigued with the tools, the upside. He's been playing overseas in the China League and really talented, humongous. One of those big bodies, very skilled with the playmaking. I think just you kind of have to have some patience to let him develop, but the upside is tremendous. And I think he's one of those names where maybe if you're a team like the Lakers, you could still be saying, hey, we can either try to get a pick earlier, maybe we try to buy one, or maybe you can try to even move up a little bit for him, because I think that's a really good value swing for a team like the Lakers. Another
I have a
popular,
question.
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, before you, let's. I guess we can pause after every
Yeah.
prospect if I have thoughts on them. For Hanson Yang, he's 19 years old, 7'1" without shoes, 7'3" wingspan, which is kind of short considering his size. But what are your thoughts on his body improvements from the last time an NBA audience saw him was like last year in summer league? He looked pretty loafing, especially on defense. But then at the combine, he looked like he really slimmed down, and his mobility and agility really seemed to come into play, and it looked like he kind of held his own against like these NCAA prospects. So I guess, what are your thoughts on his sort of progression as a, you know, I thought when I was watching his CBA stuff, I was like, oh man, this guy's kind of lead footed. I don't know how he's going to do. But then he also has some surprising pop and force at the rim. But then watching him in the combine, he just looked a lot more agile than I last saw him.
Right. I completely agree. It was even going back, if you remember last year's summer league at the California Classic, China was playing with all those teams, and it was kind of like a fun, like, oh, Hanson Yang's going to be here. We could kind of get an eye on him as well for next year's class. And then I thought he was a little bit more like drop. You had to play him in drop, where
Mm-hmm.
he was a humongous big, but he was also a little slow footed. I think the conditioning is a lot better now. He signed with Clutch pretty early in the process, which kind of got some eyes of like, okay, here we go. Like, they might be really serious about this year's draft. So I think the pre-draft process, I think teams are very intrigued. It's just one of those where how high is too high and where's the range start? Because this could be one, if you go get him, you might look like a genius in a couple of years just
Mm-hmm.
because of what do you need him to do? Huge body, productive, and very skilled as a playmaker. So I think there's a lot of intrigue with someone like Hanson Yang.
Yeah, for sure. All right, sorry I cut you off. Who's your next prospect that you want to bring up?
Well, if are we just wanting to focus on the bigs right now?
Yeah, just bigs right now.
Okay. It gets a little interesting when it comes to the bigs of the second round, because I think you could get kind of a little like, hey, dealer's choice. What's your specific ingredient you're looking
Mm-hmm.
for? I would look at Eric Dixon from Villanova as one of those big body. He's around 6'9", 250, 260. But you hear those measurements and you're kind of like, oh, okay, he's just got to be one of those bullies inside the paint. Well, it's like he is that, but he's a really talented shooter. So
Mm-hmm.
he's one of those microwave bigs, lefty that get hot in a hurry. Very skilled. So it'd be one of those wild cards of like, hey, you get a nice piece off the bench in your rotation that can get hot and take over a game from outside. So one of those names I'm kind of keeping an eye on because I think he's had a good pre-draft process and might be some good value in the second round if you're looking for just a player that can give you some nastiness and some offensive firepower in the rotation.
Question about him, because
Yeah.
one of my general questions in this section was, is there a paint eating forward who's like 6'9", who plays bigger than his position, who you could see play up eventually as an undersized center, but he makes up for things with his wingspan, rebounding, etc.? That kind of sounds like Eric Dixon. I don't know much about his game. Would you say he's sort of like, you mentioned that he can space the floor a little bit. Is he sort of like, could he be like an Isaiah Stewart type? big or something like that?
Eric's a little bit more of like, hey, if you're looking for some offensive firepower, you're going to love that. But if you're looking
Mhm.
for the potential two-way forward, I think you might be like, Eric Dixon might not be that guy. Just the defense, he battles, he's physical, but that's just not his specialty. But if you're looking for, and obviously with the Lakers, they're like, okay, well, we got Luka, we got all these guys. We'd like to get some more nastiness defensively, but Dixon's one of those guys, he gets red hot and you just can't stop him because of his size.
Mm.
He's got that high release and he can put it on the ground and be physical towards the basket. So I think you could be intrigued with the value of like getting him later on. But there's obviously some other guys where I think when you're picking that late in the second round, you're also trying to be like, hey, well, what's he bring to the table? Some of these guys might not have a lot of offensive game, but they've got toughness and defense. When it comes to Eric Dixon, I think he could score with some of the best guys in this class. It's just
Mhm.
what else can you get? So if the Lakers
Gotcha.
are looking for a boost, you get that.
How old is Eric Dixon, by the way?
24.
Offhand?
So
24. Okay, so
we
he's an
have
older prospect.
older prospect. That's why he's going later. And some of these guys, they had the COVID extra year, so it's
Mm.
going to be a little bit interesting. And I think that's why they're going later in that second round.
Gotcha. Okay, so one prospect I want to ask you about, and a prospect that's been kind of becoming a little bit more popular around Lakers Nation is Yannick Conan Niederhauser. It's kind of like Jackson Hayes 3.0. 22 years old, 7 foot with shoes, 7 foot 3-ish wingspan, 240 pounds. He seems like the type of lob threat, prototypical lob threat that would fit well with a Luka Doncic centric team. What can you tell me about Niederhauser?
Yeah, he'd be a really good a get for the Lakers if they could somehow land him. Played at Penn State. He's a junior, but a little bit younger. Believe he is. Sorry, I'm just kind of making sure. 22 years old or just turned 22, but a little bit of a late bloomer. He's had a really, really strong pre-draft process at the G League Elite Camp. He was outstanding. Had good measurements. Believe he measured in at around 7 foot with a 7'3.5" wingspan or 7'3" and a quarter. Excuse me. Athletic rim runner, kind of the lob threat with defensive potential. So I think it's one of those little older but still late bloomer that has some good upside. For Lakers, he'd just be one of those like, hey, let's keep it simple. He can protect the paint, he can rebound and catch lobs. For a team like the Lakers with so many offensive pieces around, I think you just need to find that. You need to find the guy of like, hey, we trust him to set good screens and catch lobs and attack the glass. I think that's what Giannis could do. So if they ended up landing him, I think that'd be a tremendous get for them. Even if they've got to move up a little bit, that's a great
Mhm.
name.
Does he have like if we compare him to someone like Jackson Hayes, like does he have more skill potentially than Jackson Hayes? Does he have some spacing potential, or do you just see him at the next level being a straight pick and roll, put back rim running sort of big?
I think early on, I would say, the Jackson Hayes comparisons are going to throw left and right. Yves Missy, even the rookie last year from the
Mm,
Pelicans, I think you could throw around. Just, I think early on, you'd start there. And then whatever else you can unlock, develop. I think there is some touch around the basket you get really excited about. But with bigs, if you can bring that to the table right away, you really have a safe floor to play for
mm,
a long time. We've seen a lot of guys get paid that way. So, with Yannick, I think that's why he's drawing so much interest right now is because teams are saying, hey, this might be a safe play if we buy all the tools and the intangibles. And I think that's why he's a good one. If you can get a certain range to draft him, he'd be a good pick.
would you say, what do you think his biggest thing that he'd need to improve upon? What would his biggest improvement area need to be at the NBA level? Would it be like strengthening his body? I mean, strengthening their body is like a thing for everybody, but especially for a big man. Do you think that would be like a priority for him?
Yeah, I think strength and with a lot of bigs like this too, you're also just trying to ask like, okay, how much versatility do we have? When it comes to switching on multiple positions, and now a lot of bigs, if you're a big man that's like, hey, he could guard 4 positions, well, you're probably going top 10, But if you're one of those that are going a little later potentially, I think you just want to be like, hey, is he going to get picked apart by point guards or whatnot? But I think with Yannick and the late blooming and developing, you're getting a little bit more intrigued of like, hey, this is trending in the right direction. So I think it's just the versatility of switching on to smaller defenders and
Mm.
being able to hold your own early on, which I think he'll be fine.
Awesome. Cool. Good to know. I want to ask you about an older prospect and someone who I think might realistically stick around at around the 50-ish range. What are your thoughts on Michigan's Vlad Golden, 24 years old, 7 foot without shoes, so probably like 7 foot one, 7'5" wingspan, 250 pounds. He's a pretty big boy. 9'3" standing reach. He seems like a pretty safe floor sort of big. What are your thoughts on Golden?
You know, it's funny you ask. He's one of those guys that every time I watch, I can't quit. I'm like, someone needs to draft him. He's just productive. It's funny because I this year was kind of catching up at the end of the year on Danny Wolf, the other big man who's going to be a first rounder, and I just kept saying Vlad just keeps popping every time I'm watching Danny Wolf. Vlad just keeps making good plays. So I think he'd be one of those really sneaky picks towards like the realistic Lakers range right now if they don't move, that you might be surprised because he's a lot more skilled than you think at first. He can shoot a little bit. He's got a little bit of playmaking, but he's just tough and physical around the basket. So it would be one of those picks where I would be, kind of circling. I'd be like, this one might stick. Like Vlad with the Lakers could be a great thing because he just kind of knows his role. He knows exactly what to do and doesn't try to be something that he's not. But when you're talking about just interior presence, rebounding, physicality, and then also has a little bit more skill than you would expect, I think Vlad would be a great name to kind of throw in the mix. It's not the sexiest name for Lakers fans, but it's one of those where you're like, well, we found our backup big, and he might even surprise people and play more than that. So I like that name a lot.
Yeah, he's definitely not like a elite vertical lob threat spacer. But then when I watch him play sometimes, I'm like, but he's a really good finisher as a roll man because all of a sudden he'll come up with his like long 7'5" arm and just sledgehammer it down. He's like pretty forceful dunker. And I think that's why he pops off the page, right? Like when you just watch him in totality, you're like, oh, okay, it's kind of boring, vanilla. And then all of a sudden he'll come out of nowhere from the trees and just like hammer it down and like continue to like tear the rim down. He has so much like competitive fire about him that I think he's kind of has like that infectious energy that I kind of like out of a 7-footer. Another older big, what are your, and I think he's a little bit different than Vlad Golden. What are your thoughts on Amari Williams? 23 years old, 7-footer with a 7'5" wingspan as well. He's a good rebounder, good shot blocker, but he's also a really good passer. Which is kind of unlike any of these other prospects outside of Hanson Yang. But what are your thoughts on Amari Williams?
You kind of asked me earlier about like Isaiah Stewart. This one where Amari reminds me a little bit of Isaiah Stewart just because of the physicality, the build. He's really, really tough. But he's also like his playmaking is fantastic. I think there's some real stuff to his playmaking. That's where he's at his best, when you can kind of run him through handoff screens, like let him have a little bit of vision and get backdoor cutters. He's got some stuff to his game. I have penciled him right with Vlad as one of those like, hey, if you're picking late in the second round, this is the route I would go. Like you might be surprised at the return you get. So another one too with the Lakers where it's just kind of knows what he is. He's a beast on the boards, good around the basket, but really skilled as a playmaker and a decision maker. So I think it's one of those, like, you might be surprised if you're having him as your backup big and all of a sudden you're like, oh, we got him on the court with some shooters and Luka at times. And he can hold his own he's got great vision and anticipation. So Amari, Vlad, I know those names aren't drawing the most hype right now, but those are names where I'm like, I think a smart team would grab these guys as like, hey, we could find some real value here with a big man, rotation.
Yeah, there's always seems to be like a market inefficiency with these older players. And if you know how to find them and you know how to fit them properly into your system, it could really work out for you. And a guy like Amari Williams, he just seems like a very good, like, connective player on both ends of the floor, along with his physicality and toughness. Lastly, out of this section, sorry, my voice just croaked. Lastly, out of this section, the one prospect I want to ask you about, I don't know how divisive this guy is. I think he's the youngest out of this group. Rocco Zikarsky, 18 years old, turns 19 in July. He's the tallest player in this NBA draft, 7'4". I think 7'3" without shoes. He has a 7'5" wingspan, tallest standing reach, 9'6". What are your thoughts on Rocco? Because on the surface, if you kind of just stack up like natural progressive steps in his development, you could, if you squint your eyes, you're like, okay, he's like a lob threat. And the fact that he can move the way that he does, the fact that he can pop off the floor the way that he does at 7'4", 7'5" is kind of rare. obviously the ceiling is there, but at the same time, the floor could also bottom out because he's so frail, and you're not sure whether his body can sort of withstand the toils of the NBA. But at the same time, if I'm looking at Euro bigs who also have his same sort of body frame, the ones who succeed, at least albeit for a short time, the ones who succeed seem to be the ones who have mobility and athleticism, kind of like Kristaps Porzingis, or Chet Holmgren, who's not a Euro big, but kind of has that same like stick sort of frame to him. But yeah, what are your thoughts on Rocco Zikarsky?
He's a bit of a wild card in that second round. Been playing in Australia. Going into this year, a lot of people thought he was going to be a top 20 pick. A lot of us thought he was going to be a lottery pick because it's so young. The measurables jump out to you immediately where you're like, oh my goodness. And it's just one of those, the playing time never came around. I think the development is still a little bit more of a learning curve. And with bigs, it's so funky. They just kind of click out of nowhere. So that's why I think teams are still intrigued with him as potentially an upside swing, is because you're saying, hey, maybe let's just get him with our staff, be patient. He's still so young. And there is good tools. Like it's the shot blocking's great. The vertical pop can be really impressive. I think it's just the in-between game. Like he's really good as a lob threat, and he's really good at like shot blocking when you're meeting him at the rim. It's just everything else needs to get together. So it's one of those, there's two good areas of foundation, but there's a long way to go with the rest of it. And a team, like the Lakers, you might say, hey, look at the youth and the upside and the tools. Let's get him in the G League and play him as much as possible. And just the first year, we're just getting him reps and playing time. You might be surprised because you just don't see, 7'4" with that pop and tools. And this young, it's someone's gonna take a swing because they're just like, if we can be patient on a second rounder, we might be surprised. But I think this year was just kind of more of everyone's evaluating them, that it's a little bit more of a work in progress than we thought maybe, but it's still worth a swing at some point. So for a team like the Lakers, you might be like, hey, we still like this kid and he's still got a ton of stuff to unlock. Why not take a swing? We might be shocked. So definitely one to keep an eye on. I think teams are going to be intrigued at some point.
Yeah, I think for the Lakers, because they have gone out ahead of things and said, we are going to trade for a center, we're going to sign a center, they may already have that position sort of set. So with their 55th pick, they might want to get a project like Rocco to be the future. Because if you're getting a guy like Amari, like even if he can contribute right away, he's already going to be 24. Is he really going to play ahead of the center that we traded for, the center that we signed to the taxpayer MLE, so maybe the play could be Rocco if he's still there in order to sort of, do the light years thing and also develop for the future. All right, why don't we take it to break here? When we return, let's talk about some wings. All right, so we are back. Tyler, when it comes to versatile 3-and-D-ish wings, who are some of your best prospects in the number 35 to undrafted free agent range for the Lakers? I'll sort of tee you up with some younger prospects first that I've sort of studied up on, and you can touch upon whoever you'd like to and tell me whether you think they'd be a good fit for the Lakers, and then we'll round things out with some older prospects. What are your thoughts on North Carolina's Drake Powell? 19 years old, crazy measurements, kind of killed it at the combine with regards to measurements. I know he didn't play in the scrimmages, but it seems like he's sort of rising towards the like late first at this point. So if the Lakers want him, they probably will have to like buy into the early second or even into the late first. But yeah, what are your thoughts on Drake Powell? Because he pops off the page. He seems like your prototypical 3-and-D wing, especially if his 3-point shot can hold up at a higher volume. But he's got all the measurables and the pop that you'd want from, a starter kit sort of wing.
Yeah, a big time recruit out of high school that, went to North Carolina. And we see this story more often than not when it comes to the draft world, is the guy that just didn't, live up to the hype as a freshman, one and done. They might not put up the biggest stats, but a lot of times it comes down to roster construction. We've seen Jaden McDaniels, who was with the Timberwolves, kind of was a big time preseason recruit and went late first round. Peyton Watson with the Denver Nuggets. So Drake's kind of now one of those names where you're kind of intrigued by, hey, the previous tools were really exciting. He was a potential lottery pick coming into the year. and just didn't have a clear fit at North Carolina with their roster. So defensively is one of the top talents in terms of just you're getting excited about what he can do in terms of versatility, how good he moves his feet, how quick he is, how lengthy he is. There's a lot of confidence for him defensively. Like he feels like he's at his best when you watch him on the tape on that side of the ball. Offensively, there's some work that needs to be done. He's more of a slasher right now. The shot's a little hesitant. Just someone might need to work with it, build some confidence. But you can kind of see why either a team would trade up to go get him or he could climb a little bit, because there's just a lot of really good tools for a defensive 3-and-D that could be that good of a defender. If a team's convinced, hey, we can unlock the offense early on to a respectable level, then you have something special. So I like Drake. I think he's a bit of a wild card with this draft now, because I see how quickly teams like to draft 3-and-D guys on draft night, and then how quickly teams are like, like our 3-and-D list is getting short. So he's going to be really interesting to kind of see where he ends up. But wouldn't shock me if a team like the Lakers try to go up and get him, so you can kind of develop this guy for years to come, especially with the CBA and the salary cap and balancing that. I think teams want these guys to kind of work with.
He kind of reminds me of the way that like Omax Prosper or like Chris Dunn sort of started to rise near the like tail end of the first. But yeah, Drake Powell, like when I watch some of his highlights, like he has like the Sports Center top 10 defensive highlights where he can just snatch the ball out of the air for a steal, or like snatch the ball out of the air for the like combo block rebound where he doesn't even have to rebound the ball because he got it all in one go. And so yeah, he has very tantalizing athletic tools. How about we do this? Like, I gave you one prospect that I want you to talk about. Why don't you give me one? Like one for me, one for you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm here for. Kind of earlier in my rankings, but I think could be someone on the board. Will Richard from Florida is a wing that's, I think it shocks the people of when you look into his game, when you look into the advanced numbers, you get really, really excited. Just a very efficient wing that can really shoot it from outside, knows his strengths. If I was a team like the Lakers, those were the guys that I would love to try to somehow get in the second round. Is one of those, like, we know exactly what he is. He knows exactly what he is. And this is what we need. It's just someone alongside that could be tough, play smart, shoot the ball, catch and shoot guys. So he's a little older. But Will Richards is just one of those, like, he was a big part of that Florida national championship team. And just a smart player that might have a higher floor than people think. So I think that's an intriguing one to keep an eye on for the Lakers if he's still around or if they need to go up a little bit.
I'm unfamiliar with is Will Richard, you said?
Yes.
How would do you have like an NBA comp for him that I can sort of
I'm always trying to get you some comps. Let me think here. Sorry. It's just one of those where I'm always diving into the database.
No, you're good.
Little Contavious Caldwell Pope vibes.
Okay.
So I know Laker fans probably know that one too.
Yeah.
But Keon Ellis is one too. It's just one of those tough physical like wings that can also shoot it a little bit. You're not going to lean on them to be the most versatile offensive player, but I think those are the guys that stick around for a while and probably outplay their draft position. So I think he'd be a good value one for the Lakers.
Okay, good to know. Like I like those high floor guys who kind of just know what they're doing when you put them out onto the court. On the opposite end of the spectrum, what are your thoughts on a guy like 19-year-old Hugo Gonzalez? I think he may be a mid to late first rounder too, maybe early second. So the Lakers would probably have to buy a pick or trade up. But I think he's very intriguing just because of his size at this stage. He has like NBA level size, speed, more athletic than he looks, especially as a weak side shot blocker. He can kind of do a little bit of everything. The only thing that's weirdly suspect about him is his shot, but it looks mechanically fluid to me, even though the percentages don't say so. And the way that Real Madrid was playing him, they were running him off screens as if he were a movement shooter. So I don't know if that's just like wishful thinking or whatever, but I think like the skeleton of a shooter is there, but mostly I like his sort of defensive tenacity and like two-way potential. What are your thoughts on Hugo Gonzalez?
I'm a big fan. I think if Hugo was playing with some other teams, he'd be kind of a lottery pick type of guy. I think the tools are that special. It's always tough with these international kids that don't play a ton. Is we're like, well, how can they not play that much if they're this good? Well, if you go look at Real Madrid's roster this year, there's about 10 former NBA guys on it. It's one of those you kind of, oh my gosh, they're playing. So it's tough for him. And the fact that he even got minutes just speaks to Hugo's ability. I think a really smart team would go target him to try to trade up. Now, maybe it's the Lakers where they're like, we're going to go get Hugo because we're lucky that he's on the board at 23 somehow. And they're going to be really excited about developing him. Really feisty player, athletic, good size. I like the defense, the competitiveness. He's one of those guys that all of a sudden flies out of nowhere for a tip dunk, and you're just like, when does the motor turn off? I think Real Madrid tried to kind of develop him as an off-ball player this year. So I think they kind of had some strategic, hey, let's work on your off-ball shooting, your off-ball movement. And there's some good stuff. I know what you're saying with like the shot. I buy the shot. I think it's trending in the right direction. But if you went back and watched some of his previous, underage, like Spain with FIBA, you would be like, oh my gosh, this guy looks like a lottery pick for sure. It's just tough this year because he's kind of been sitting on the bench a little bit, so we don't have a ton of tape. But he'd be a name that if the Lakers somehow got in the first round and drafted him, I'd be like, oh man, that's a win of a night for the Lakers.
Yeah, I almost give him more brownie points that he played in a professional team like Real Madrid because he's starting from the right sort of trajectory, being used as a tertiary role player because that's the role he's going to play for a team like the Lakers. But you also know that he has upside and pop if you give him a longer leash once he learns the fundamentals. So for me, I'm like, yeah, I would take a swing on that guy while his value is quote unquote low, because if you just look at the stats, you're like, oh, what is this? 7 points or like 5 points, whatever. So yeah, I really like Hugo Gonzalez as well. What do you have another name that you want to throw out?
Yeah, you're giving me some exciting ones too. So now I'm like pumped up for the Lakers. I'll try to think of one that's a little bit more juicy. I don't know if he'll be on the board there for them, but Noah Penda overseas is another international guy that I think would be a smart play for the Lakers. Bigger bodied forward that is like kind of a 3-and-D guy that just smart player that's got some physicality, some thickness to him. So it'd be one of those, I think, a higher floor, good defensive asset that could really fit well with what the Lakers, I think, need and just give you some positional versatility. He's kind of got a weird range. I think he could be a late first round guy, or he could be in that early second round you're trying to kind of move up for. That's also why I think this new format with the draft, with like there's a second day where you could be trying to be like, hey, we could get up and target one of our guys if we get into this certain range. So I think Noah Penda would be another name to keep an eye on.
Who does Noah Penda remind you of?
It's just like the classic, like Kyle Anderson-ish vibes of just like not the greatest athlete, but like the tough player that plays good on both sides, that probably plays 13 plus years. I'm going to look up and be like, why didn't I have Noah Penda higher? Because he played forever. So one of those that you're just like, hey, the roster needs this, but it's not going to be, making any highlight tapes. It's just one of those smart players.
Speaking of Kyle Anderson, the next prospect I want to ask you about is Alex Tuhey. He's more of a tweener, small forward, power forward, 21 years old. But I mean, he is your prototypical, can kind of do everything on the court. He's kind of Kyle Anderson-esque because of his versatility and his length. But then once in a while, he'll just kind of surprise you with, a crazy hammer tomahawk jam or something like that. So he's a little bit more athletic than I think he lets on. But yeah, what are your thoughts on, I like to call him Alex Toolsy because he has a lot of tools, but yeah, Alex Tuhey.
I'm still a big fan. I saw him a couple years ago at Nike Hoop Summit in Portland, and immediately I was just like, this kid can play. Like he's not going to be the sexiest prospect of all time, but I was like, this kid knows how to play basketball the right way. At that time, he was supposed to be going to Gonzaga. He was a big recruit, and then he had decommitted and decided to stay overseas and play in the NBL. I thought he's gotten much better in a year, like when it comes to some areas you're looking at, but smart forward on two ways, like plays really tough and physical. I think he's got the tools to be a really smart 3-and-D guy. So I think there's a real shot he could be there for the Lakers. It would be a great pick because I just still think there's, I don't know why, but I watch him and I'm like, there's value here. This guy just, I feel like he playing alongside even like a better roster, some better talent around him. I was like, he knows how to survive and make like an impact and find his role. So I think Tui's an interesting one for sure. The shots kind of come and go. If you can get it consistently, he's got everything you would want to at least carve out a lengthy career as like a 3-and-D guy. So I think the shot's the swing skill. It is with a lot of guys, but especially with Tui, if you can get just mid 30s to high 30s, you're probably like, okay, this guy's going to play for a long time.
Yeah, he kind of reminds me, with regards to his strengths and weaknesses, he kind of reminds me of like a 6'8" version of Austin Reeves. Even though I know Austin Reeves at like Wichita was like a spot up shooter, like over the course of when he became more of an on ball guy, his shooting has kind of been spotty. But he can also obviously do everything. Um, what are your thoughts on? I mentioned him at the top of this episode. Sion James. I don't know how to pronounce it. He's 22 years old, out of Duke. We're watching in the NBA Finals right now a guy like Lou Dort obviously excel. He kind of reminds me of a taller Lou Dort because of his build, his ability to shoot, and his ability to scrap. Yeah, and to me, Sion James feels like a prototypical like 3-and-D. This is his role. This is what he does. He's athletic as well. He's fast. He's the perfect tertiary sort of player that you can kind of plug and play, I feel like. But what are your thoughts on Sion?
I always feel like these are the guys that I'm like, why don't teams draft them earlier? Because it's just like, well, they know what they are. The team drafting them should know what they are. And that's why I think, he's probably a realistic, like makes a ton of sense for someone like the Lakers where you're going to know right away, like, okay, I'm coming in here to be a 3-and-D guy, offer some versatility. If I can handle the ball a little bit to run the offense for, a certain look for a certain set, not all the time, that's probably what you want. But just he's one of those on-ball pests that you're like, oh man, you can't overpower him usually because he looks like the Hulk out there in a smaller body, but he's physical, he's competitive, he's tough. He was a big asset for Duke this year. Like when Cooper Flagg started finding his groove, Sion understood how to play his role, play off the ball, be a catch and shoot guy. He was at Tulane before, so he can be productive. He can be a bucket guy, but I think now he's kind of humbled himself to understand like, next level, I'm going to be the 3-and-D guy that really plays smart and sticks on the court because I'm helping the offense go. I'm making good plays defensively. So think for sure there's a route in which he could end up on the board for Lakers. And if that's a selection, I think that's a really smart move they could do.
I also really liked how he ran the pick and roll with Malawak as well. He likes to throw a lot of really nice alley-oop jams. Now, he's probably not going to have center with that type of measurables on the Lakers. I don't know. We might trade for one, but it's a nice swing skill to have in his bag. Why don't you give me an older wing who might be dropping because of his age once again, that you like?
Yeah, I think RJ Lewis maybe could be a name, and I don't know if he'll be dropping or if he'll just be kind of in that ballpark. He's at St. John's, one of those players where you'd be kind of watching tape and all of a sudden he does something just kind of, oh, where did that come from? Like really good athleticism, the 3-point shots come and go, but like the potential is for him to be a floor spacing asset with some defensive potential. And he's really got that athleticism that just sneaks up on you on tape. So I think that would be another option to kind of consider. He's probably going to be in that range for the Lakers, or maybe they move up a tiny bit, but I think he should still be an option there.
So I really like RJ Lewis. I'm trying to figure out what I'm missing on him because when I squint, I'm like, this guy looks like an all-star wing, but obviously he's not. But I mean, I kind of like, I try to do these tiers when I do comps, like of like worst case scenario, median, high ceiling. And my worst case scenario was like, I don't know. I thought the same way about Jarrett Culver. So he might just be the next Jarrett Culver. But if he's not, I'm also like, I just saw him throw down a 360 dunk in transition and then swat this dude's shot away to the stands. Like he averaged like 7 rebounds last year. I mean, yeah, he's tantalizing to me on both ends. I can see where his weaknesses may crop up on the offensive end of the floor with his decision making and maybe over dribbling and like, kind of erratic shooting. But what's your opinion of like if he learns how to stay in his game and sort of rein in like the and one offense stuff. Do you think he could be a productive player because he has like the motor and the physical tools, like both fundamentally, but also like his defense also shows up in the stat sheet with regards to steals and blocks as well.
It's one of those where I think you see the offense teased, but there's just so many good things defensively that you're like, oh, if we just can unlock one area consistently on the offensive side of the ball, we have something here. I've watched a couple of his games this year, and all of a sudden he'd fly out of nowhere for a just incredible rejection at the rim, and I was like, where did he come from? And he's at the top of the backboard right now, so he just has those defensive moments of kind of like an alpha, like setting the tone. But I think offensively, you're just like, we just need something consistently. Like he'll have a stretch of games where he's shooting the cover off the ball from three, and you're like, this is it. He figured it out, and then all of a sudden he just gets cold. So it's one of those, if he could just buy into like, hey, just be a catch and shoot guy defensively, or just be a consistent, slasher or something. I think there's just sometimes with these prospects, it's like, hey, you got to figure out your role and you got to be realistic about it. That's not saying you shouldn't be confident, but a lot of guys, they're coming in, they're like, hey, I'm going to be the guy. And it's like, no, you're playing with Luka and LeBron. You're not going to be the guy. So try to figure it out. So with RJ, it's, I think, just finding his niche in the NBA, finding your role. And defensively, he should be able to hold his own because he's around 6'7" with athleticism and good instincts. But I think it's just, can you get him to buy in offensively? And if you can, you might have something.
Yeah, he's kind of like a slightly more explosive, like Cam Reddish, with regards to like the good parts and the bad parts as well. What are your thoughts on? I can loop these two players together. You can talk about them in succession.
Okay.
They're both 23 years old. I think they're sort of similar to one another and kind of similar to RJ Lewis as well. Jameer Watkins, he's going to be 24 in July. And then Micah Peavy, he's also going to be 24 in July. Jameer Watkins, I think they both had really good combine showings at the during the two scrimmage games, but I kind of like both of them just because they both compete defensively. They both have some on-ball primary creation juice. At the next level, they'll probably be secondary creators. But at the baseline, it seems like they're pretty tenacious point of attack defenders who have good motor. And then they're both around, I don't know, like 6'7" as well, with like near 7-foot wingspan. So what are your thoughts on Jameer Watkins and Micah Peavy?
I think Jameer's one of those you're probably trying to get the defensive specialists and take advantage of those. There's some really good defensive stuff with him. It's one of those where he's been so productive and got good measurables. If he is there, I think that'd be a great route to go because you get some positional versatility. You get the defender. He's also a good playmaker. Like there's some good stuff there with that. Both of these guys, it just kind of comes down to the shooting consistency from deep. With Peavy, it was one of those players that Thomas Sorber was on that team. He was, Peavy was playing good throughout the year. Then Thomas Sorber gets hurt, and they kind of needed someone to step up. And Peavy just went on this run where you're like, where did this come from? And it was big numbers, effective from all over. It kind of just got your attention to like, this is something that we shouldn't overlook because of the late run of the year, but it was that impressive. And he's a much better defensive player than I think you kind of give credit for. So with Peavy, I think you're buying the offensive versatility and some defense. And Watkins, I think you get, well, the shooting might not be as consistent, but you get the playmaking on top of that. So they're both good defensive players. I think Watkins is probably a little bit better on that side. But Peavy's more of like the offensive versatility. So it's tough because you look at these guys and you're like, man, if they weren't older, they'd probably be going earlier. And that's where I think the draft gets really interesting because you're like, well, do we just buy in on the productive guy that knows what they are? And I think that's where interviews and everything will play a big part.
For sure. Out of these three guys that we just talked about, these older guys, Jameer Watkins, Micah Peavy, and RJ Lewis, when you're looking at the totality of their package, who do you like sort of the best for the Lakers?
Yeah, it's one of those, I think I kind of go back to Peavy's one of the guys it's just caught my attention late when it comes to evaluating and kind of looking into the tape. I think he'd make a lot of sense when you're trying to also get that offensive versatility, but I think the defense is a little underrated. So I think I would lean that way, but I get Watkins too. I think that would be a really good option. It kind of if all three of those are on the board, I'm like, hey, you're already winning it with all those three names
Mhm.
still going for the Lakers if they're still at 55. So for me personally, it'd just probably be PV because I think there's some punch on the offensive side of the ball.
And to your point, it might come down to interviews and whether the Lakers think this certain prospect can hone in and rein in things first. Because I think all these guys average like 17, 18 points, right? So they're used to being sort of like the on ball guy. It's all about, do you have the transferable skills at the next level to just be a role player first and play defense and hustle, etc. Landing the plane here, are there any other last second like wing prospects you want to bring up that we haven't touched upon yet?
Yeah, I feel like I'm bringing up all of them, and you keep throwing me good ones. John Tonji is probably one from
Mm-hmm.
Wisconsin. I think he's a little bit. It'd be a kind of a weird fit with the Lakers just because he was very ball dominant at Wisconsin, but had such a good year. He'd be kind of just an interesting one of like, hey, maybe they let him be him off the bench. Maybe they're looking for that in the rotation. But I think there's a lot of those guys. There's a lot of specialists where if you're looking for certain areas where it's floor spacing, Chaz Lanier is another one that could go before that, or maybe he's on the board because he's a little older. I think there's a lot of options for Lakers to get excited about.
Cool. Keep those names in mind. Just for due diligence sake, I know I said we'd only talk about bigs and wings, but just for due diligence sake, are there any guards who you feel might slip that if they somehow fell out of the draft, you think the Lakers or any team near the end should just take a shot on them because they're so talented or have a complete package despite their size or age? The Mr. Irrelevant Isaiah Thomas special.
It's one of those for me. I think Curtis Jones of Iowa State's probably a guy that might not get drafted, but he was when Iowa State was healthy, they're kind of one of the best teams in the country, and he's around 6'4". He was their sixth man, and it wasn't because of lack of talent. It was one of those like he was so good. He was like their Jordan Clarkson, basically. He came in and he got hot in a hurry and was a smart player, underrated defender. I'd like him. I think Mark Sears, obviously, people should be kind of familiar with him from Alabama. Undersized, but there's just too much skill that if I was a team, I'd be like, yeah, he's undersized, but we're going to take a chance. We're going to see how this works in summer league with their G League team. So those are definitely two names that I would just kind of keep an eye on as maybe they don't get drafted, but they might be interesting, camp invites or summer league roster additions.
For sure. These are good names to keep in mind because the Lakers like to round those guys up after the draft and have them play for their summer league team for sure. Relatedly, last question. Is there a dark horse prospect, regardless of position, that you could see slipping for one reason or another that you're personally high on, that if they slip, you think a team like the Lakers at the back end of the draft should just take a flyer on because of either their upside or their NBA readiness / IQ and intangibles, regardless of their age?
I would say Auburn's Janiah Broom would be a name that I might not. He was been projected months ago, kind of being late first round. I think he's still around the second round now. Wouldn't be surprised if he. I just heard mixed things about the interviews. Wouldn't be surprised if he slips a little bit. And I think at some point, a team like the Lakers, you'd be smart to either go get him, or you might be shocked that maybe he is still on the board and you take advantage of him. So big man from Auburn, very skilled. Didn't have the greatest vertical testing at the combine, which got plenty of eyes on the internet, but it was one of those where he's really good at anticipating shot blocking, like the right time. So older, but really talented big that I think would be great value for a team like the Lakers.
Awesome. Good to know. Well, Tyler, thanks so much for hopping on and helping educate us on this draft, especially in the second round where it can kind of get kind of murky and nebulous, but we appreciate your insight. Why don't you tell the good people where they can find you at once again on your socials and any final draft things you want to plug?
Yeah, I'm at Tyler_Rucker on Twitter and all those fun social medias. And then just NoCeilingsNBA.com. We've got write-ups on every prospect possible in the draft. And we've got a draft guide, digital, download, all that good stuff. So thank you, Jonathan, for having me on. And wish you guys the best of luck with the draft. It'll be interesting to see what they do.
Thanks for hopping on. And I guess away we go with this Cooper Flag draft. It should be an exciting time. And I hope you guys get all of the buzz and the content that you guys can lap up next week or this next week heading into the draft. So thanks for hopping on, Tyler.
Appreciate it.
Awesome.